With a new Republican-controlled House of Representatives, the very first thing they did was pass a bill, I should say, that will allow for wealthy tax cheats to get away with dodging their taxes. They said they wanted to do this, and they did it. And it is, in fact, about the wealthy getting away with not paying their taxes. Now, what is the measure? Well, the measure, dubbed hilariously the Family and Small Business Taxpayer Protection Act, passed in the House 221 to 210 along party lines, with every Democrat in opposition and Republicans applauding the passage. Now, we've been following this story from the very beginning. Usually when Republicans say they're gonna do something, they'll do it, especially when they have a whole media apparatus behind them, when they have their corporate donors behind them. And of course, the corporate donors and wealthy donors do not want to be audited. They don't want the IRS to look into their taxes to see whether or not they're paying their fair share. Now, I should be clear, the bill does absolutely nothing to protect American families or small businesses. In fact, quite the opposite. The legislation would rescind $72 billion of the $80 billion worth of new IRS funding authorized under the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, that investment in the IRS, which of course was effectively gutted by Republicans in previous years, was meant to actually provide a significant return on the investment, because there are so many wealthy people who avoid paying their taxes, who are tax cheats, that beefing up the IRS so they could actually do the audits necessary into the complicated taxes of these wealthy individuals made all the sense and would bring in revenue that we should have had in the first place if these individuals didn't dodge their taxes. And well, Republicans don't want that. Republicans want to assist the rich, the wealthy, in screwing over the American people, screwing over the American government. They never fight to lower your taxes, if you've noticed. They won't fight to make, the tiny tax cuts for ordinary people permanent, but they will fight to make sure tax cuts for the rich and corporations are permanent. And I just find all of this so interesting, because this is what they care about. This is what the populist right is really about.
Yeah, so look, the law in this case is indisputable. They're adding the IRS agents, and it very clearly says that they are not to audit people making under $400,000. So when the Republicans want to reverse this, they are protecting people making above $400,000, and that is their entire intent. Do you know how much the top 1% avoid in taxes every year? $163 billion. Okay, so even what the Democrats put in is not enough to get back all of that money, or even a huge chunk of that money. But it brings back enough that you wind up reducing the deficit by well over $100 billion. That's great news, right? This is the Republican Party that pretended to be in favor of deficit reduction their whole existence. Now they're like, who cares about the deficit? Serve the rich, serve the rich. Now, is that the sense you get from American media at large? Of course not. So right-wing media predictably pretends that this is for small businesses, but mainstream media assists a little bit. So I'm gonna read to you one of the first paragraphs in the New York Times coverage of this story. They said, the Republican focus on the IRS comes after years of complaints from the party that the agency had unfairly targeted conservative groups and harangued small businesses and middle-class families. Well, why are you printing their lies? Are middle-class families making $400,000 or $401,000 a year? Are they making $500,000, $800,000, $8 million, $8 billion? What do you mean middle-class families? Yes, the Republicans lie about protecting middle-class families, but this doesn't affect middle-class families at all. So why are you reprinting their lie as if it might be true? And did you notice what they said earlier? Because Republicans complain that the agency targets them, but we know if the agency targets them or not. There was an investigation done into that, and they found out the IRS actually targeted liberals more than conservatives. Just because the Republicans yell their lies out loud doesn't mean that the New York Times has to repeat them, and especially without fact checking them. And by the way, the facts about it affecting 400,000 and above and costing all this money, that's buried at the very end of the article, and is presented not as a fact, but as Democrats say this, Republicans say that. Well, are you a reporter or aren't you a reporter? What is the truth? We know what the truth is, but you don't want to say it because of political correctness, because you're afraid of offending Republicans.
Look, guys, this isn't going to pass in the Senate. So I guess that's the only silver lining to this story. I think it's important, and they know it's not going to pass in the Senate. But they did the symbolic vote anyway to posture for their donors, because 2/3 of American voters are not in favor of this, according to polls. But they did it anyway to show their love and devotion to their corporate donors. It's a symbolic vote that they know will not ultimately pass in the Senate. Okay. But this is what Republicans want and what some corporate Democrats want. Okay, they love to help their donors because money talks. Okay, people are motivated by incentives and disincentives. So all the incentives for them right now, while the left is weak, while the left is unorganized, while the left is basically engaging in an endless circular firing squad, there is no accountability. There is no outside strategy, really. And so this is what we've got. We've got a pathetic, weak Democratic Party. We've got an insanely corrupt system where the media is owned by corporations. Our politicians are owned by corporations. I mean, if you made $600 on Etsy last year, you better claim it. You better report it, because you will be audited. I guarantee it. But the rich skirting their taxes, and I'm talking about millions, in some cases billions of dollars, they get away with that. Because this country is owned by corporate donors. This country is owned by the wealthy. This entire system is crafted and rigged to the advantage of the powerful. And unless we change that, again, policy debates are cute, but there's a reason why the outcome of these policies tend to overwhelmingly benefit the wealthy and the powerful.
All right, my last point here is that, look, I'm not even positive that it's not going to pass the Senate, because to your point about corporate Democrats, Anna, there are certainly plenty of them in the Senate, and I can see Manchin and Sinema saying like, well, I'm so bipartisan, I love the rich too. But remember, Biden can veto it anyway. So that's why it is just posturing, and Biden would veto it. And now, rare credit to the Democrats, they did pass this bill that does audit the rich. That's kind of unprecedented in Washington. And there you go. There's a difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.